Okay, with a countdown like that, let's do it all.
That was fun.
It's a
I
long
feel like
countdown.
I feel like I should be popping a cork here. That was
It
so
seems like a
fun.
year-end countdown.
So fun. Well, if you are joining us live or not live, or you're watching this later, welcome to another episode of Getting to Unstuck. We are the trifecta, Crystal, Carol, and Colin from Whole Human Coaching, and we show up here regularly and we talk about things that matter because we believe that we are here to reclaim our humanity and to just really build a world that we love and a world that we want to be a part of. So today we're talking about when it all falls apart. So when imagine, and I know that this resonates a lot with me. I felt like I've said that phrase many times. It's all falling apart. But think about the times of when you are trying so hard to keep your life, your business world, or your plans from crumbling around you. What happens when it falls apart? How do you pick up the pieces, and where do you take your first steps forward? And we're really lucky today because Carol's going to be sharing a little bit of her story. And so I think we should just dive into it because we've got some fantastic takeaways from this. And Carol, we would just love for you to kind of take us into that place. And when we talked about this topic earlier together, we talked about when it all falls apart, and you had something to speak to about that. Can you share with us what that was?
Absolutely. We started speaking last time about that happened, what next? And
Mhm.
there's lots of those moments in our lives which are where it requires a pause and a consideration for what's next. But the reality is we also have those moments when the bottom falls out. And for me, it was a circumstance where I had begun a business, been totally engaged and loved what I was doing. My husband and I were decided to import a product called yerba mate. And for anyone who is aware of what yerba mate is, it's this amazing tea-like substance that comes
Mhm.
from South America that is usually consumed in a gourd with a straw or a bombilla. And we were introduced to it when we were traveling and found that it was a really wonderful delivery system for caffeine that had none of the drawbacks of coffee. So we thought, oh, this is what North America needs. But we were probably about 10 years ahead of the curve.
Mhm.
And so we were pushing ahead with our business and really getting into the importing and manufacturing, a steep, steep learning curve, things that we had never imagined we would need to know from our previous background in business. And we had a container of yerba mate that was being delivered from Argentina, and it landed in the port of New York on September 11th, 2001.
Oh my
Oh.
god, I didn't
Oh
know
my
that.
gosh.
And
Oh, no
it
idea that this
was
happened.
it was, of course, completely lost in the confusion of September
Oh.
11th. And for weeks, we had no idea where it was, if it existed. There was so much chaos,
Oh my goodness.
confusion, and tragedy that was happening in New York
Mm.
City that we just went weeks and weeks and weeks without knowing where our product was. And finally, I got in touch with this wonderful woman in New York who could trace the container because it was a
Mhm.
container could be tracked. And we had this incredible experience of connecting with somebody who had been on the ground at 9/11. That part was incredible.
Yeah,
However, it set us back by a good 6, 7 weeks.
sure.
And that was our season, was what we'd
Yeah.
intended. So it was one of those blows that happens to small businesses that is absolutely unpredictable.
Yes.
And weeks later, when the container finally made it to Vancouver on the west coast of Canada, we were so far behind that we dug a big hole.
Yeah.
And the hole, of course, you know how business goes. Sometimes that hole just keeps
Yeah.
getting deeper and deeper. And the reality of it was that it caused us to become bankrupt. There was just no options. We could not dig out from where we needed to be. So I faced personal bankruptcy and then tried very desperately to sell the business and had some real good nibbles on where the business could be sold, which wouldn't have saved
Mhm.
my financial behind, but it would have at least propelled, would have paid off my suppliers, would have done so many great things. And I had a deal that was ready to be signed. And the person, the head of the organization that was going to be buying my company, fell off a horse and broke his neck.
Oh my God. Sorry.
So
I mean,
I know it's just,
Oh,
the whole thing,
wow.
the owner of the organization, all
Oh
the
my
due diligence of
goodness.
it done, we were ready to
Wow.
sign the deal, and his life fell apart.
Oh,
you can't
yeah.
make this stuff
Oh,
up. I mean, oh my
no, this is
No.
like stranger than fiction.
It is. So, I got the news that they weren't moving ahead because they had to completely
Yeah, clearly.
recalculate their whole, and so then there was nothing. There was absolutely nothing left. And so I had to realize that I was at the bottom of where I thought I would never be. I was
Yeah.
bankrupt. My husband had left the country to try and desperately to get some work going somewhere else where he knew he had
Mhm.
contacts. My kids had moved out, and I I had this moment. We had built a little kind of shipping room in our townhome to do
Mhm.
some of the small work, because this was still a small business. We were still
Yeah.
like doing it on our own. And I was sitting in the midst of the chaos, because that's what's left when things are falling apart. And I
Yeah.
remember remember this so distinctly. Sitting on the floor, looking around, thinking, "Holy shit. How did I get here? And
Yeah.
how am I ever going to get out of
Yeah.
here?" And
Yeah.
there was this little voice in my head, and I don't know whether you remember the old Laurel and Hardy movies. There's Stan Laurel and somebody
Mhm.
Hardy, and they're like the big
Yeah.
fat guy and the little skinny
Yeah.
guy.
Yeah.
And one of them always says, "Oh, what a fine mess you've got us into now, Ollie." And it's always some totally ridiculous thing.
Yeah.
And that voice, for whatever reason, was in my head. "What a
mm,
fine mess you've got us into now, Holly." And I cracked
Oh.
up,
Yeah.
because what else do you do at that point
Yeah.
but laugh?
Yeah.
And it was that moment that I recall that was where I bounced at the bottom. I didn't just flatten at the bottom.
Mm. The
And
bounce.
from there, I mean, that was 2003, so it was a couple of years after things were really did not
Mhm.
turn around. Things did turn around, but in a completely different direction. I gave up everything that I gave everything that I could back to my vendors so that they
Mhm.
could recoup something, and I started looking elsewhere. And
Mm.
it took me on a journey which actually led me to both of you,
right.
because if that hadn't happened, I would never have joined the organization that I had where I met Colin.
Mhm.
I would never have had the opportunity to become a coach and work with the organization where I
Yeah.
was introduced to you,
Yeah.
Crystal. And so the whole thing shifted.
Mhm.
But there were certainly some moments of despair and
Mm,
absolute darkness before that.
Yeah. Mhm. Mhm.
So, the bottom does fall out. And I
Yeah.
think many people can relate to that.
Mhm. Yeah, just when you say that word despair, like I can feel like I feel because I there's stories of that I have it when I hear that word despair is like that I know that feeling like despair.
Mhm.
Yeah. I find it really interesting that one of the words you said though was that there was the bounce. Um, and do you think that when we are at that moment that that's a recognizable moment for us and what we can look for in those moments if we're having a bounce moment?
I think so. And as I have told this story, and you can tell I've told it several times,
Yeah.
a number of times, because it gives people something to, like, here's an experience that is real. The piece that I think what I recognized was there was some humor.
Mm,
And, sometimes humor is very dark.
mhm.
And sometimes humor is not, is really
Yeah.
gallows kind of humor.
Mhm.
But that was the piece that I recognized that shifted for me,
Mm.
is that instead of it just looking dire, there was I had no it felt like I had no option but to laugh at myself. And
mm,
that laughter, that moment of, "Whew," allowed me to see some glimmer, and that I love that word glimmer
Mhm.
of light.
Yeah.
Well, it's like if you're even in when you're in a dark room, right? There is always, and I don't know where it comes from, but you can always find light, right?
Yeah.
Mm,
Mhm.
And even if you close your eyes, you can see sparkles of light, and
Yeah.
I love that idea of a glimmer because to me it means that beyond that pinhole of light, beyond that tiny glimmer, there is much more light, right? And
mhm,
that's a beautiful thing. I would add to your story or the concept of a glimmer. I would add that it's important to think of the timeline as well,
mm.
because so often we judge ourselves in the moment, right? We're
Oh,
like,
yes.
"Oh, this is a disaster," or "I'm bankrupt," or "I'm a
Mhm.
failure," and
Yeah.
we all know the labels that we attach to ourselves.
Yeah. Mhm.
I had a similar experience where somehow I got to see that the timeline was much longer than I thought.
Oh,
Mhm.
yes.
And
Mhm,
so if you can, I think if you can attach a glimmer and a bounce and a glimmer to a wider time frame, and just remember that time will heal, time will change.
mm,
There will be
Mhm.
opportunities and possibilities. And look at the possibilities we're discussing right now, right? So
mhm.
Right. Yeah.
but
Yeah.
you didn't know those when you had your bounce
Right.
and the glimmer of light.
Yeah.
So I always say, when you're talking about these moments of falling and really falling rock bottom, I mean, I understand personal bankruptcy very well myself. And 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 there's something about giving yourself permission to relax and know that you
Mm,
have a lifetime and maybe multiple lifetimes. I don't want to get woo woo on anybody, but
Mhm.
you know, um, don't judge yourself so harshly in that moment,
mm,
because that
Yeah.
mhm.
glimmer of light will open up and you will see it all again and you will see the
Yes.
sky again. Um,
Mm,
we're so transactional and so quick to
yeah.
judge each other and ourselves
Yeah.
in such a limited time scope, right?
Yeah.
Mhm,
Yeah.
That
I think it's very interesting you say that, Colin, because um, Louise Hay, in her book called "You Can Heal Your Life," the
mhm,
the work basically, so much of the work is being able to look in the mirror at yourself and just be able to start to speak words of love. Like, you don't,
mm,
not even like, and that's the affirmations. It's not like I'm, I'm doing this, I'm doing that. It's not, you're not trying to stir up all this stuff that's like false bravado or anything like that. It's
mhm,
actually being able to just look yourself in the eye and remind yourself right from the beginning, I love you. You are
mhm.
loved. You are
Yes.
worthy of love. And Carol, I'm curious, like what was you talked about the humor. What did that look like for, I guess, for you, and that you feel is like a universal tool that you started to be able to use on yourself, for
Mhm.
yourself, in service of yourself in your future?
Well, I think being able to reach out after that, because I think it was probably within a day of that,
Hmm.
that I put some feelers out for other things I could be doing.
Hmm.
Because the other thing that often happens when we're in that dark room is we forget that we have connections.
Hmm.
We forget that we've built a network, and
Yeah.
sometimes it feels really far away, but there
Yeah.
may be somebody or someone who you
Yeah.
remember a conversation with,
Hmm.
who said something to you and you think, "Oh, I could have a conversation with them." And
Yeah.
for me, it began as a temp agency. I went and
Hmm.
I remembered a woman I had spoken to when I was looking to hire somebody, and
Hmm.
she ran a temp agency, and at the time, I was the employer, and
Right.
so I was at a very different place, but I remembered my connection with her because we connected human to human.
Hmm.
And
Mm,
so when I went to her, it was kind of cap in hand, and it was kind of like, "I'm in a very different place now, but I wonder if you might have some work for me."
Hmm.
And she did. She remembered me as being someone who she connected with, and
Hmm.
from there, it did begin to build back up again.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
it was in that space of feeling very alone that what was necessary was to remember that I was not.
Mm,
and that there was
Oh, that's
somebody.
beautiful.
that's
You know, the
so
word
gold. Yeah.
the
Mhm.
word that you said about humanity, that shared humanity that
Mhm.
us three are trying to bring back into the world of business, right? It's like
Mhm.
that 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 was the one thing that got the conversation going again,
It was.
Mhm.
which
It
Yeah.
was.
is such a good reminder for everybody that's listening and watching about being human all of the time, no matter what status or position you might be in, right?
Mhm.
Employer, employee, CEO,
Yeah.
executive, doesn't
Yeah.
matter. First,
Yeah.
the really important.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it is that connection. I mean, it's that which we have an opportunity for in everything that we're doing,
Mhm.
is to remember we don't know where we'll be in 10 years. We don't
Yeah.
know when we may want to lean on or
Yeah.
count on some of those people that we've known. And so what are we building in each interaction that we have? When
Mhm.
we go to the grocery store and we check out, are we connecting with that person at the checkout?
Yeah. Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
are we making sure that we make eye contact? Do we say hello when we walk down the street? Because
Yeah.
that's what
Wow.
makes a difference,
How
right?
are we adding value, right? Like, because we are intrinsically whole, right? Like, so we don't lack anything as humans.
Mhm.
So remembering that then gives us it's an opportunity for us to allow ourselves then to realize that I can add value in any and every situation, because circumstances are just circumstances. And and it doesn't I know very intimately, I'm very intimately acquainted with the fact that it doesn't feel like it's just a circumstance when you're in it. It
Mhm.
feels like it's a life defining future, right?
Mhm.
Like because it can feel that way, but that which we see is subject to change. Like it's
Mhm.
just there's so much potential in it. And I find it also fascinating that Carol, that you stayed curious. You may not, at the time, you probably weren't, maybe not able to recognize that, but there
Yeah.
was, and whatever propelled you forward to be able to stay curious, but there was a curiosity, and you actually asked. You didn't sit there and like, why is this happening to me? I mean, probably I have those, everybody has
Probably
those
do
3
some of
a.m.
that too.
conversations. Yes, of course, that is very human,
Mhm.
right? Why is this happening to me? What did I do? Why am like I'm the problem? But there was something in you that managed to hang on to staying curious about what was possible. And I think that
Mhm.
that to me is a really fantastic takeaway for us here, is around continuing to stay curious, and thinking about how that served you, and what it built.
Mhm. Yeah.
So so I would add, and it came through kind of in what you guys were just saying, remember who you are and who you will be, which is what we
Yeah.
work on, right?
Hmm.
Mhm.
Hmm.
And the remember who you are in those moments is you are still a powerful, beautiful soul,
Mhm.
notwithstanding the circumstance of the moment, right? So
Yeah.
remember who you really are and remember who you will be. And that's all about possibilities, because you had
Yeah.
no idea, Carol, that you would come in and intersect with me in a certain business, and then intersect with
Mhm.
Crystal in a certain business. And now we've
Yeah.
all intersected together and we're doing this.
Hmm.
So
Hmm.
the other comment, or the other observation, just on what you guys were saying, we ask ourselves, why is this happening? Right. And I think the fact is we don't know. So
Yes.
don't
Yes.
judge yourself for it,
Yeah.
because you have
Mhm.
no idea how something, that pivotal moment, right, for all of us,
Mhm.
led us to today.
Yes.
So,
Yeah.
so that idea of why is this happening? I think that question should be deferred, right? Oh, let me see.
Yeah.
I'll answer that in 5 or 10 years when I
Yes.
Yeah.
know
In
why.
When I
hindsight, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Why is this happening?
Yeah.
Because it can be really judgmental too, right?
It
Yeah.
is. It's
In this
very heavy.
instant.
Yeah. Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the
I know
answers
we
can be
need
magic down the
to
road.
wrap
Yeah.
up for today, but I just if I may, I just wanted to distill 2 pieces that
Mhm.
thank you
Yes,
from
please.
for both of you. One of them was to look for the glimmer, because you'd be
Yes.
amazed what you can see through a pinhole when you're looking.
Yeah,
And
fantastic.
the other is to remain curious and, if possible, with a little bit of laughter. Find something funny, just to
Yeah.
find something funny, and that they know that laughter yoga, when people get
Yes.
together in a room, I don't know whether you've ever
I've
participated in
done
it.
it. It's so fun. Yeah.
You just
Sounds fun,
laugh,
though.
and it's
It's
contagious.
fantastic. Yeah.
So, go watch a Laurel and Hardy movie because that glimmer does grow,
It
and
does.
Yeah.
you have no idea what's possible.
Exactly. Yeah.
Mm.
So I'm reminded as we wrap up of I don't know, I don't even know which beer commercial it is, but there's a gentleman that always says, like, stay thirsty, my friends. And so what I'm thinking is, stay curious, my friends.
Absolutely.
Love it.
um,
Yes.
Thank you for this conversation. And don't forget, as if you're still here, I just want to remind you that if to hop on over either on LinkedIn and follow us on LinkedIn, because we really would love to be able to be broadcasting this directly from our LinkedIn page. And the more the merrier that are over there, and start following us. And also don't forget to sign up for our email over at wholehumancoaching.com. And we will see you soon. Thanks for joining us.
Oh, thank you.
Bye,
Great
everybody.
conversation.
Have a good weekend.
Mhm.